Venerable Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho was for 41 years the senior-most Western bhikkhu, following Ajaan Mun's path of practice. Ajaan Paññā, as he was called, was a man of intellectual brilliance who, through his own efforts in meditation, was able to establish a strong spiritual foundation in his heart. While showing a selfless devotion to the task of presenting Ajaan Mun's Dhamma to his many disciples, his calm and purposeful presence touched the lives of so many people. He became a pioneer of the Western Sangha whose leadership influenced countless monks and lay people to practice Ajaan Mun's teachings, and whose translations and interpretations of Ajahn Mahabhu's teachings introduced generations of Buddhists to the Thai forest tradition. Ajaan Paññā was born Peter John Morgan of Welsh parents on the 19th of October 1925. His birth took place in Mysore state in South India at Kolar goldfields, where his father was working as a mining engineer. At the age of 7, he was sent to the United Kingdom by his parents to begin his formal education. He lived with his grandparents in Wales until the rest of his family returned from India several years later. His family then settled in the English Midlands, where he completed his primary education. Because of the Second World War, his family was forced to move several times before he finally completed his secondary education. In his mid-teens, young Peter contracted bovine tuberculosis in his right foot. He underwent several unsuccessful treatments before having the infected bone surgically removed from his foot, resulting in his ankle bones being fused together. He was not required to serve in the military during the war, and thus avoided making a lot of bad karma for himself. Peter was then free to further his education at Faraday House in London, where he graduated with a degree in electrical engineering just as the war ended. Following graduation, he spent 2 years in India working as an electrical engineer in the Kolar gold mines. Upon his return to England, he continued working as an engineer for a further 7 years, first in Stafford, then in London. It was during this period of his life that Peter became deeply interested in Buddhism. He began to contemplate the value and purpose of birth and life in this world in light of its inevitable march towards sickness, old age, and death. He began to question the very nature of existence and concluded that popular religious and scientific explanations were seriously flawed. In his quest for the truth, he discovered that the Buddha's teaching provided a firm basis in theory and practice, which could serve as a platform for thoroughly investigating these issues. He read Buddhist doctrine extensively and joined several Buddhist organizations. Finally, inspired by the example of Bhikkhu Kapilavattho, who had ordained in Thailand, Peter decided to denounce the worldly life in order to fully pursue his search for the truth, unhindered by the burden of worldly concerns. He was ordained as a samanera at the London Buddhist Vihara on the 31st of October 1955. He was given the name Paññāvaḍḍho. In December of that year, Paññāvaḍḍho and two other samaneras flew to Bangkok, Thailand, together with Bhikkhu Kapilavattho, with the intention of ordaining as bhikkhus. After staying at Wat Pak Nam with Longpor Sot for a month, on the 27th of January 1956, the three samaneras were duly ordained as bhikkhus. In mid-July of that year, they all returned to London, where they settled into a small vihara, provided by the English Sangha Trust. Gradually, the others all returned to lay life, leaving Bhikkhu Paññāvaḍḍho to look after the vihara alone. He remained in charge of the vihara for a full 5 years before another bhikkhu arrived to take his place. During that time, he selflessly devoted himself to the task of teaching the Dhamma to the best of his ability, not only at the Vihara, but also in giving lectures and in organizing retreats. At the same time, he fulfilled his obligation to the monk's life of meditation, practicing it as thoroughly and as strictly as possible. He deeply felt the lack of a reliable mentor, a good teacher who could assure him that the noble goals of the Buddha's teaching were still attainable in the modern era. Were there any living arahants who could guide him along the path to Nibbana? If he could find such a guide, he would wholeheartedly dedicate himself to that goal. To that end, Bhikkhu Paññāvaḍḍho decided that he must return to Thailand and look for a good teacher, one who could command his full trust. He flew back to Thailand in November of 1961. At first he went to stay with Venerable Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho at Wat Chola Praton near Bangkok. While there, he asked a Thai friend to scout out the best, most revered meditation teachers in the country and report back to him. Eventually, this friend took him to meet Venerable Ajahn Mahabua, a long-time disciple of Venerable Ajahn Mun, who was widely renowned to be an arahant. Impressed by Ajahn Mahabua's resolute character and profound wisdom, Bhikkhu Paññāvaḍḍho moved to his monastery Wat Pabantad in Udon Thani province and became his disciple. He arrived on the 16th of February 1963 and remained resident there for the rest of his life. Ajahn Mahabua soon shortened his name to Paññā, and from then on he was known simply as Ajahn Paññā. He remained a close disciple of Ajahn Mahabua for the next 41 years. He said that he was able to put up with the hardships of living in the remote jungles of northeast Thailand, mainly due to the strong faith he had in Ajahn Mahabua and his teaching methods. The climate was hot and uncomfortable. The food was simple and rough. There was a language barrier to overcome. And his fused ankle left him with limited mobility. But his heart was bolstered by his faith in the teacher and his perseverance in the practice. Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho's mind tended naturally towards wisdom, and that allowed him to progress quickly in meditation. With the benefit of Ajaan Mahabhuva's careful guidance, his understanding of Dharma deepened and became more comprehensive with each passing year. In 1965, at Ajaan Mahabhuva's insistence, Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho reordained into the Dhammayutta Nikaya, with the present Sangharaja, Samdat Pranayana Samvara, as his preceptor. He took reordination at Wat Bawaniway on April 22nd of that year. Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho possessed a very subtle and refined nature. His practice was beyond reproach. He was always composed and circumspect, and displayed wisdom in everything he did. Not only did he develop himself to the fullest, but his exemplary life and practice influenced many people from all over the world. From the beginning, he worked tirelessly to translate Ajaan Mahabhuva's writings into English, publishing translations that were distributed free around the world. Gradually, he became a source of strength and inspiration to the Buddhists from many countries who traveled to Thailand to see him. This is especially true of the Western bhikkhus who have joined the Sangha at Wat Pabantad since his arrival. He always showed a selfless devotion to the task of instructing these monks, and they always relied on him to teach them the correct way to practice Buddhism. In 1974, the English Sangha Trust invited Ajaan Mahabhuva to visit London, England, with the intention of trying to establish a Theravada Sangha there. Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho accompanied his teacher to London, where he helped to communicate the essence of Ajaan Mahabhuva's Dharma teaching to the Buddhist faithful. It was to be the last time that Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho returned to England. But although no Sangha was established at that time, their inspiring presence laid the groundwork for the future English Sangha. His knowledge of engineering became a valuable asset to the monastery. From the time he arrived, he was involved in almost every building project carried out at Wat Pabantad, often designing the project and overseeing the construction himself. Ajaan Mahabua had so much faith in his wisdom and engineering skills that he really questioned Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho's judgment in those matters. Whether the engineering was electrical or mechanical, structural or electronic, he had mastered them all on his own initiative and could apply them with a skill and grace that constantly amazed his fellow monks. The ease with which Wat Pabantad developed from a simple forest monastery into a thriving monastic centre is a testament to Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho's ability to manage a forest monastery's resources while protecting its traditions and its meditative environment. In September of 2003, the first symptoms appeared of a disease that would eventually cause his death. He was diagnosed with colon cancer, and he decided to treat it with natural herbal remedies. He appeared unfazed by his condition, and he felt quite sure that the medicine was working. Over the following 9 months, the cancer appeared to gradually regress. But in June of 2004, it resurfaced and began to spread rapidly. He showed great equanimity as death approached, never displaying any concern for the failing condition of his body. Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho passed away in complete stillness at 8:30 a.m. on August the 18th, 2004. He was 2 months shy of his 79th birthday. He died as he lived, with his heart purely and simply at peace. Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho's remains were cremated at Wat Papantad 10 days later. His funeral ceremony was the largest event ever held there. An estimated 50,000 people attended to pay their final respects, including over 4,000 monks. Something extraordinary occurred on the day of his cremation. The sky was clear and cloudless. Yet, on 3 separate occasions, a circular rainbow appeared in the clear blue sky, each time encircling the sun like a large luminous halo. The rainbow first appeared as his casket was being placed on the funeral pyre. It appeared again later when his life story was being read aloud, and yet a third time when Ajaan Paññāvaḍḍho lit the funeral pyre. It was as though the power of his spiritual attainment had created an external, visual image to reflect the depth and subtlety of his virtue for all to see. It marked a supremely graceful conclusion to the life and practice of a monk whose loving kindness and humility radiated softly from his presence to encompass the whole world of samsara.